This is Jason with Green Star Productions. Thanks for watching my videos. We're going to jump right into this one. Alright, what you're going to see me doing in this video is making an icon, for lack of a better term, kind of what you'd see on an altar of the Babylonian goddess Tiamat. Now I found a nice little miniature of her on Etsy, and I decided, okay, well, I'm going to paint this up and put it on a burl of wood and then set it on a block of resin. So now you're going to see all the steps I took in setting this up. What you're seeing me do here on screen is I'm filing down the burl that I'd chosen. This was obviously a homemade DIY disc grinder, just so I didn't wear up my wrist trying to hold a sander in one hand and the burl in the other. Then what you see me doing here is I'm testing the burl against the diameter of the piece of PVC pipe I'm using as a mold, since resin won't stick to it. And I'm just going to keep filing this down and filing it down until it fits right in the mold. Now, with this video, I'm not so much going to be focusing on the mechanical, here's me filing it down and all of that fun stuff. This is more just going to be the art of it, for lack of a better term, and what I learned from doing this project. This is only the second piece that I'd cast using a PVC mold like this. I've had great results. And as you see, here's the burl that I have already decorated with some that I've already used resin on. I also pigmented it with Pearlex's Duo Violet Brass combo, because I kind of wanted to get a feeling of water flowing over this, and I wanted it to look kind of like an alien landscape, very weird. And I think it succeeded pretty well, as you see here with the colors I'd chosen for the miniature. I really like the paint job I did on this one. I mean, I'm no miniatures war gamer or anything like that, and this was only I think the third, maybe the fourth miniature I painted in my life, and I think I did a pretty good job on it. I mean, I learned some dry brushing techniques and layering different types of paint to create different effects. And as you saw, I couldn't exactly get there's no good flat place on this model on the burl rather, to set the miniature up right. So what you see me doing here is I'm just using some Sculpey, some unfired Sculpey, to attach it to the base. And I'm gonna, as you'll see, I try this a couple of different times because I wanted the miniature to be standing upright. Of course, didn't want her tilted at an angle or anything. And I didn't want it to look like she was just hanging out in mid-air over this, so I ended up building up a mound of Sculpey that kind of looks like a little outcrop. And I do apologize for the camera angles. I'm still getting the hang of where I'm putting the camera and making sure I'm still in the center of the frame and all of that. And frankly, at the point that I shot this video, because this video I shot it about almost a month before this video comes out. So one of the things I discovered was that my work area was just not set up right for me to be able to do pieces like this effectively, and certainly not to film them. But what you should see in future videos is that I've reconfigured a bunch of the workspaces so that everything so that my workflow is better, and so that I have places I can actually set the camera where you can see what I'm doing. There we go, that's more like it. Now as you see, I've got the burl itself has been super glued to a piece of plexiglass at this point, and that's going to form the base that I'm just going to glue the PVC pipe to. Here's a nice close-up of the miniature itself. As you notice, there's a kind of mottled green effect I managed to get on the dragon heads here. And that's just I just painted them green and then touched it up with some alcohol ink, because I didn't want to get bogged down in doing all the fiddly little details, because I don't really have that skill yet. But I did like how the paint came out on those dragon heads. I especially like the effect I managed to get with her eye. Just that one little black outline, and then put a yellow iris in there, so it just pops out a little more. Contrast with the yellow of the dress, of course. And here you see I'm just fiddling around with it until I get it in the position I want. Now, as you'll see, that I should probably label this video as a partial failure, because I ignored some of the directions I had on the Alumilite resin, which says don't pour more than 2 inches of thickness of this stuff at once. And being in a rush and really wanting to just finish the project, I just really wanted to see how it looked. I rushed, and you'll see the outcome of this later on in the video. But I shouldn't have done it, and I'm probably going to go back and remake this at some point. And of course, I'll have to buy a new miniature and find another piece of wood. But this was a nice learning experience for me. I mean, I also got some experience again painting a model and then building a little base for it. And as you'll see, the burl didn't sit flat. I don't have a bandsaw, so I had to do some fun little jiggeries with the burl to get it to sit the way I wanted, so that it was looking like almost like a waterfall, and that she was standing just right next to it, with that whole alien aesthetic going on. So, note to anybody else that does this, again, follow the directions on your resin. Otherwise, you're going to expend a bunch of effort and time, because I ended up painting this figure, I think, 3 times. I ended up having, because I primed it first and then tried to paint it, and then the primer didn't, blocked up a bunch of the little details, so I had to go strip that off and then repaint the figure again. So again, just, I put a lot of work into this, and I'm ultimately not real happy with myself for ignoring the directions and ruining what was a really nice piece of art. In a lot of ways, I feel like it's ruined. It probably isn't. I'm just a little perfectionistic when it comes to my own art, as most people are. Alright, and at this point it looks kind of, this was the point that I'd kind of said, alright, I'm good with this. Like the way that she's standing, like the way the burl's arranged on the plexiglass. Got that little base built up underneath her, so it looks like she's standing on a boulder or some other type of outcropping. And of course, I love the brass and the duo brass and violet resin combo. Alright, so here you see I've got the at this point I have the PVC pipe just set around the burl, and with the figure on it, of course. And as you see, this is a piece of pipe that I'd used on a previous project. This was, I believe this is the same one that I used on making my little Odin diorama. So I'm reusing the same piece of pipe here, and if you saw that video, you saw that I'd had to cut the pipe to get the piece out. Figured, okay, well, I got it in a fairly straight cut, so I should be able to just patch that together and hold it together with a couple of pieces of duct tape, as you see I've done here. Now that part did work out real well, so I'm probably going to continue anything that I want ultimately to end up with at least 2 round sides or whatever. I'll probably still continue casting in PVC this way. It's a lot easier and ultimately cheaper, and not as wasteful if I build a box around a piece and then I have to cut down a square. It's a lot easier to flatten out one side of a circle than it is to round out a square. Yep, and there you see, it just barely fits within this piece of PVC pipe, and this is like a 3.5. I think this is a 3 or 3.5 inch diameter pipe that I've used. All right. Now, as you see, all right, I've given this about a half hour or so to set up. I super glued the PVC to the plexiglass, and then I went over it with the hot glue, as you saw, just trying to give myself some surety. And there's my dog's food bowl. Now this is my pressure pot that I use for casting it. That I used to just keep all the bubbles out of the resin pieces. Alright, and there's my workspace. Pretty bloody messy. Alright, now these are what you see me doing now is I'm putting in the bottom of the mold, I'm putting in two pieces. These are both pieces of HDPE plastic that I've cut an egg-shaped form out of. And you see my lab assistant and German Shepherd, Brogan. Now these pieces of HDPE, I just used a router and I cut these egg shapes out of it about halfway through the depth of the piece, and I just poured some extra resin I had. I wanted to see if I could make molds this way. And if you want to see the results of that video, well, I'll have out a whole video full of my experiments and some of them that worked and some of them that didn't. And as you see here, just to keep things separate, so I'm not limited to just casting one piece at a time, and because frankly the bottom of that pressure can is not flat, I just use some regular. These are 8-inch cake pans that I've used here. Now they just barely fit within the pressure can, so of course, as you see here, you put one face up and then you put one face down. I've just got a piece of parchment paper to catch any possible drips on that. As you see here, well, that arrangement didn't work. The piece of pipe sits too high with that pie pan the way it is, so got to take that out. Got to take out these, the piece of HDPE, the HDPE eggs. So I'll have to put the pipe on the bottom. As you see, the parchment paper is still kind of stuck to it. I just took that for fortune. And on top of that, I'm putting that other cake pan upside down. Now it does rest on top of that PVC pipe, but again, since this was an experiment, I wasn't too worried about things leaking. Here I am just checking the level of the pans just to make sure it's not tilted too much one way or the other. I of course did not want to end up with a whole mess of resin all over the bottom of my pressure can. Alright, now that fits. Lid goes on. And here we are the next day. Now, as you see, I've already taken the HDPE out. I just wanted to make the reveal a little more dramatic. Alright, now, as you see, there's a fracture line in the resin. Something went a little wrong here. As you see, there was a small explosion, and I poured way too much. Now I'd already decided I was going to flatten out the front of this cylinder just so the figure I could look at it. We can look at it and it's not all distorted. All I've done here is I've marked out where I want to keep this flat, because if I'm going to be running this on a grinding wheel first, and then I'm going to sand it up so that it comes out nice and flat. Actually, no, I take that back. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, as you see here, this is after I've run it on the grinding wheel. This is just it's wet at this point because I've rinsed it off with water. So I ran it on the disc sander, flattened out the front. And here I am putting this is after I've put some of the tabletop resin I use for a top coat on a number of my pieces. I've just poured that over the whole piece here, as you can see. And you can kind of see it through the little bubbles that are in the Envirotex here. You can see that there we go. Yeah, just using the heat gun to pop a bunch of these bubbles, and you can see that it's already looking a lot better. You can see a lot of the details on that front-facing dragon's head. So at this point, I'm just going to leave this sitting out on the desk overnight. Now, you don't need to use a pressure pot with this tabletop resin because it's so thin and does not need the kind of heat that you get with more casting resins. So this one I just let sit out on my workbench overnight to cure, and then we'll see the results here in just a couple of seconds. Now, one thing I do recommend is if you do want to get into casting small pieces like this, and you're again doing what I'm doing here, just adding a top coat, painter's triangles will save you a lot of headache than when trying to go back and sand down the bottom of this thing later. Because doing it this way, all I have to do is I have to sand the bottom once. I don't have to sand around the edges of the bottom, if you understand what I mean. You know, I have to sand a horizontal surface as opposed to the vertical as well, which then begins to look, more and more like crap. Now, as you see, I've had some other problems that came up with this piece. I had not sealed the burl correctly, so I ended up with some funny little marks, some air bubbles that had escaped. Yeah, there you see where I tried to fix one and it didn't come out right. But again, I do love the paint job I managed to get done on this piece. Now, as you see, when the piece is pulled away, I had to cut out a section of the top of this because it had just come out way too streaky. So I tried an experiment. I just put it on the grinding wheel again, cut out a section of the top, and recast it. And that'll do it for this video. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in and watching. I know this one went a little fast, but with memory limits I had on my phone, I ended up with some real short video clips that I then had to string together. If you'd like to see a further exploration of me making one of these mini dioramas, I'd recommend watching the list of my other videos. There's an Odin mini diorama. I recommend looking at that one because this was just a nice quick piece. And again, thank you all for watching. Please, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day, evening, weekend, whatever it is, wherever you are. And that's a wrap.